Ron Berger is the Chief Program Officer for Expeditionary Learning. Expeditionary Learning is a network of over 160 public schools in 30 states, an organization that partners with districts and charter boards to found public high schools in low-income communities that send all graduates to college, and helps to transform existing public schools K through 12 toward high school achievement, character, and citizenship. Expeditionary Learning's core work is building teacher capacity through professional development, professional resources, and a Common Core literacy curriculum. Ron works closely with the Harvard Graduate School of Education, where he did his graduate work, and currently teaches a course that uses exemplary student project work to illuminate high academic standards. He's an Anna Berg Foundation Teacher Scholar and received the Autodesk Foundation National Teacher of the Year Award. He's the author of 3 books, An Ethic of Excellence, which our administrators studied this past year, A Culture of Quality, and a 214-year publication of Leaders of Their Own Learning. Ron was a public school teacher and master carpenter in rural Massachusetts for over 25 years. His writing and speaking center on inspiring quality and character in students, specifically through project-based learning, original scientific and historical research, service learning, and the infusion of the arts. He works with the National Character Education Movement to embed character values in the core academic work. His views fit right in with our beliefs, vision, and mission here in McKinney ISD. So it's my pleasure to introduce to you Ron Berger. Thank you, Ron.
Thank you. I've never had to follow Ron Burgundy before. It's an honor to be here. I have never also been part of such a spirited convocation. This is a school district with incredible pride and commitment to quality, and it really is. I traveled from Massachusetts to be with you today, and it is truly an honor for me to celebrate your good work. There is no work I know in the country that's more important and more noble than what you do. And I'm here to celebrate you and thank you for that good work. And I want to share my passion with you for quality. My life has been spent with a singular obsession, which is supporting kids to do high-quality work. And this opening with those performances by McKinney High School students, how could I have a better introduction? That was absolutely beautiful. That's the kind of quality we're looking for. Before I start, let me just give you a sense of who I am. I have multiple lives. I travel around the country supporting school districts. I teach at Harvard. But at home, I still live in a small rural community where I worked as a carpenter and teacher for over 25 years. I live on a dirt road in a house I built myself. And I taught in this tiny town so long that everyone in this town under the age of 46 is a former student of mine. So the idea that it matters that students do things of quality and have quality values is really dear to me, because my nurse is my former student. My plumber is my former student. The guy who plows my driveway is my former student. Everyone, the volunteer fire department in my community are my former students. So it matters that they have a high standard for academics and skills, but also that they have integrity and character and heart, because this is my life in this small community. I'd like to talk today about structures for building quality K to 12, something that I think McKinney already does beautifully, and I'm here just to support and celebrate that. I brought some videos and slides of student work, and I'd just like to mostly tell those stories to you today. I'll start by saying that I believe that there is a virtuous side in all of us waiting to come out. I'll be honest, in some adults it's a little hard to find. It's been buried a little bit, but it's there. But it's never hard to find in kids. Even the kids who act like knuckleheads sometimes or make poor choices, they want to be good kids. They want to contribute. They want that virtuous side of them to come out. And all they're looking for is a chance to do great things. All of us want to contribute something great. And for many kids, school is not that place. Sports may be that place, dance might be that place, Outside activities may be that place, but they may not feel like school is where they can shine. That's probably not the case here because arts are integral to what you do, projects are being infused into what you do. But my mission in life is to make sure school is that place where kids feel like they can contribute something good to show their virtuous self, to give something of quality and beauty to the world. I talk about beautiful work everywhere I go, and when I say beautiful work, I don't just mean beautiful artwork or beautiful performances like we saw this morning. I mean beautiful math work and beautiful writing and beautiful science and history. Because in any field, scientists, historians, authors, dancers, when something is great, they discuss it as something of beauty. It's a beautiful idea, a beautiful proof, a beautiful concept. That's what we want to give our kids the chance to do. Quality matters, and it matters in more than just skills, as you've heard this morning. It matters in the way we treat others, in our kindness, our integrity, and our courage, as well as in the work we do. If we're obsessing about quality in everything, in our hearts and our spirits, as well as in our work, it creates this whole culture of quality that kids feel like there's no choice but to be high quality. Kids need to contribute to feel pride. We need to have public venues for kids to contribute, like the performances you saw this morning, as scholars, as citizens, as athletes, as artists. They need an audience. And I'm going to speak today about my mission that during the course of this year, that teachers provide kids with a chance to do high-quality work for an audience beyond the teacher. So the teacher becomes the coach, the supporter, the helper, but not the audience for that work. Just like the coaches and supporters for the performances we saw today were not the audience. We were the audience for that work. My colleague at Harvard, Howard Gardner, who you may know from multiple intelligence work, uses a phrase called good work. When he says good work, he doesn't just mean high-quality work in academics. He means work that's good in quality and academic rigor and accuracy, but also good for the soul and good for the world, work that makes a contribution. And so my mission is, how can we get more and more kids to have that opportunity to do work with a purpose, to do work to make the world a little better? It might be a small contribution or a big contribution. We need to build whole school cultures and faculty cultures that center on this vision of what good work is. That good work is giving of your heart to make the world better. It might be a kindergartner writing a beautiful poem and doing an illustration to go with it, or high school kids doing service in their community. But connecting the academic mission of kids to contribution changes everything. They're not just getting smart for themselves, they're getting smart to make a better world. I want to tell the story of a number of different examples of good work. But before I go through my slides, I'm going to open with some video. Let me put this video in context. This video comes from a public middle school in Portland, Maine. The students at this school come from more than 30 countries. There's more than 30 languages spoken in this school. It is a refugee center in this town where all the students that are refugees from other countries, sub-Saharan Africa, Sudan, Somalia, get placed in this school. It has the lowest socioeconomic status of any school in Maine. It outperforms the state of Maine on tests in every subject at every grade level, every year, even with the most challenging student population. Why is that the case? It's because the students in this school are on a mission to do good, every student, that their work is connected to real-world purpose, to work of character and integrity. So let me show you 5 minutes of middle school students sharing one of those projects. So we'll roll that first video. Thank you.
But you're from Arkansas, and I grew up in
Black major.
Hi.
Good morning.
Hello and thank you so much for coming. In Windsor 7, we've been working on an expedition called Small Acts of Courage. This expedition focused on the civil rights movement in the United States and the local community members whose small acts needed to be captured for all to read.
Today, we just finished our culminating event for our expedition, Small Acts of Courage. This is an expedition that focused on the civil rights movement, and we studied the civil rights movement and major events in the movement, and then students interviewed local citizens who participated in some way or had some connection to the civil rights movement.
Our presentation today is dedicated to our interviewees. We thank you for your time, and we thank you for your stories.
Today, as part of our culminating event, we presented our work to parents, but most importantly, to the interviewees, so that they could see the work that the students completed in their oral history collection, and they could hear the words of the students as they paid tribute to their interviewees.
Ida Marie Gammon Wilson's Small Acts of Courage contributed greatly to the civil rights movement.
In college, she joined students practicing for the Nashville sit-ins. They practiced how they would handle segregation at the lunch counter. They also practiced ways to stay nonviolent.
Ida was a part of the Nashville sit-ins and also helped other students get a diploma by taking their places in their classes and helping them study if they missed opportunities to get information.
Throughout the sit-ins, Ida courageously worked behind the scenes to keep students in school and on the front lines of the integration effort. Ida remains active in civil rights today, as well as gay and women's rights. She is a great inspiration.
I think this expedition works because, first of all, the content is extremely compelling for students.
With Brown versus the Board of Education.
Their experience with the
Supreme
interviewees
Court case
creates an
declared
emotional connection to the content that they cannot get in the classroom, and really motivates them to work hard to write their stories and to present their work to their interviewees.
Julia Adams is a selfless woman who accomplished a lot in her lifetime. During her senior year, she befriended Josephine Boyd, the only African-American student in the newly integrated school.
She went over to Josephine Boyd and asked her to sit with her and her friends at lunch. This was an act of kindness that would change both of their lives forever.
Taking a courageous stand has had an impact on Julia's life. One day, a woman with a baseball bat was looking for her at school because she felt Julia shouldn't be helping Josephine.
Years later, Greensboro High School honored Josephine for being the first black student to integrate the school, and at the ceremony, Julia Adams gave a speech. Even today, Julia Adams can be found helping others.
We want to set every student up for success. So we had a rubric involved. I taught kids how to stand correctly. We talked about eye contact, volume, speaking slowly and clearly, and we practiced those skills in my classroom. There also was rehearsing, where we took the students through the process of what would happen at the culminating event, and it all felt very familiar to them today.
Windsor 7 is honored to present our 4-volume collection of oral histories related to the civil rights movement to the African American Collection of Maine. Thank you for supporting us throughout this project.
Sometimes it's not possible to get every student in front of an audience. So it's important to build in some structure where students can celebrate their work and share their work with a significant adult. And we often find a reception after the event really works well for this.
You know, it is really wonderful to find that something small that you did has an impact on the next generation. How nice.
It felt good to do it. Her story was important because she helped Josephine Boyd become the first African American to integrate Greensboro High School, and her story needed to be heard.
Culminating events are a time when every student's work is celebrated, where every student has the opportunity to be a part of their individual success and the group success.
It was an honor, I guess, to be able to present her story to her and show her how much she actually affected people.
And to have their work appreciated, and to share that with the community, and to realize their work is a part of something much bigger.
Textbooks are often behind the times. They do not reflect how we are and where we've come from and where we've come to. And this kind of presentation by these young people, I think, would be just an absolute wonderful experience for everybody to have, because we are making some strides in this nation.
So I'd like to share stories with you today of beautiful, important student projects projects where students made an attempt to contribute to their community and make it a better place in small ways or in big ways. The first story comes from this year, this past school year. Polaris Academy, Chicago, Illinois. These students did a study of the US Constitution. They were struck in the Second Amendment and by Second Amendment rights, but they lived in an environment in their community full of gun violence. Their school is the star in the middle of that map, and the dots are gun shootings within 1 year around their school building. They realized that because of the Second Amendment, we have to uphold gun rights, but they also thought we have to do something to make our community safer. These students did a year-long project in studying the Constitution and studying local law to think, how can we make a difference? And they worked with local police, local community activists, local social workers, anyone in the community who was trying to keep peace, and created a book to honor those people. Did the stories of those peacekeepers. They created public service announcements, and they organized a citywide day of peace where gangs would put down their guns for 1 day, like the ceasefire we're trying right now in the Middle East, for people to see it can be peaceful for 1 day. And they put public service announcements on TV throughout Chicago, presented to the mayor and the city council, and had a sweep and greet day where people left their homes to clean up their neighborhoods on that 1 day. They were not successful in getting an entire citywide day of peace, but a third of Chicago, the third most closely around their school, had an entirely violence-free day for the first time in the history of Chicago. And these students realized it's not going to be easy, but we're going to keep doing this. They learned so much about law, about the legislature, about the community, and about how hard this is to take on. They became writers and speakers. And when we had our national conference for my organization, Expeditionary Learning, with 1,000 educators, they were the keynote speakers. 9th grade students, Springfield, Massachusetts, took on a project they called Greenprint. It's a blueprint for a greener city. These students were trained by city engineers to do energy audits of city buildings. They learned how to look at boilers, HVAC systems, insulation, window treatments, electricity, and figure out where were the buildings in the city losing money and how much investment would it take to make them more energy efficient. They prepared a report for the city, and they started with the schools. They went around to all the city schools, and they thought, how can the city schools be more energy efficient? And they proposed to the mayor in a public presentation that he invest $156,000 to retrofit city school buildings to be more energy efficient. And they guaranteed that within 5 years, the city would make all its money back. The mayor, still the mayor, Dominic Sarno, went back to his engineers and said, what should we do? And they said, the kids are right. We trained them. They're good. And he invested $156,000. Within 2 years, the city had saved more than $160,000 on energy expenses. They came back to the school and said to the students, we've just set aside $250,000 for retrofits of city buildings. We want you kids to be our scientists for it. These are all low-income students. First, the students pointed out that it was kind of like slave labor, since they weren't getting paid. But they realized if they're all going to college, they can do this same work they're doing now as 9th and 10th graders and make a really good living and help the world at the same time. It was no surprise that they led the state on the state's 10th grade science test. It's because their work was for a purpose. It was to do good for the world. 3rd and 4th graders in Washington, D.C. did a project around homelessness, another school that I worked closely with. To get into this school building, you had to walk around homeless people. So these students did a study of homelessness. They split themselves into research teams, and they went out and they met with the police, they met with the shelters, they met with the soup kitchens, they met with the churches, and they met with the homeless people themselves. They had 3 guiding questions. How do people become homeless? What are you doing to help the homeless? And what can we as little kids do to help the homeless? In addition to charity, in addition to putting together food drives and clothing drives, these kids learned something. They said, the homeless people lost more than their homes, they lost their humanity. People don't want to talk to them anymore. They don't even want to look at them anymore. We need to give them back their humanity, not just a home. And so they thought, we have to take what we learned and share it with little kids. Now, they were 3rd and 4th graders. If you teach high school, you think of them as little kids. They didn't think of themselves as little kids. They created a book for really little kids, kindergartners and 1st graders, and it's an ABC book of homelessness that could be read aloud or read by little kids. L is for lonely. I'm lonely because people don't notice me. And here's the watercolor painting that went along with that of loneliness. That book was distributed around DC so younger kids could see homeless people are people too. I talked to those kids after the project. Talked to one little boy, Jamal, and I said, Jamal, do you think anything changed from your project? He said, Mr. Berger, everything changed from this project. And I said, what do you mean everything changed? Because as an adult, I kept thinking there's still homelessness in DC. In fact, there's still homelessness right outside the school. So I said, Jamal, what do you mean everything changed? He said, Mr. Berger, before this project, we were afraid of the homeless people right outside our school. We didn't know who they were. They didn't know who we were. We know every one of them now. Every morning we say, good morning, Doris. Good morning, Michael. Good morning, Mr. Smith. And they say, good morning, Jamal. Have a good day at school. He said, everything's changed. It's not the same as it was. And if you think, how can a 3rd grader change the world? In a little way, like that. When those 3rd graders were 8th graders, they had a distinguished visitor to their school. And they went to their teacher and said, could we give our distinguished visitor a copy of our book? And she said, what book? And they said, the book we made in 3rd grade. I don't know about you, but there was nothing I did in 3rd grade that I was still thinking about when I was in 8th grade. But they were still proud of that book. So she said, sure, and they went down and gave a copy to their distinguished visitor. This was their visitor and her husband, and they have a copy, the first family, of this. I went back to that school last year. These kids were now seniors in high school. Every single one of them had been accepted to college, every single one. And I found Jamal. And Jamal said, Mr. Berger, you do know the president has a copy of our book. And I said, I know, I do too. That's something I share with the president. We don't have to choose between high quality work and great assessments of learning. The students in the schools that I work with that are project-based outperform their districts by double digits in every subject, and especially for subgroups of students. And in these high schools, every single student gets accepted to college. And it's not because they focus on test prep. It's because they focus on connecting work to a purpose, to the virtuous side of kids, of trying to contribute something beautiful. And by contributing something beautiful, the national anthem that was sung this morning is as beautiful as life gets for me. It doesn't have to be changing your whole community, but it's contributing something of beauty that makes you want to do a great job in it, to practice and get great at it. I'm going to back up, tell you where I live. I live in a community that has 7 buildings. It has a church. It has a post office, which is also Mary Dillman's home. I also taught Mary Dillman's kids. I taught Mary Dillman's grandkids. You have to go into her home to get your mail. It has a town hall. It has the Shoot Spray Athletic Club. There are no elliptical machines in this building. It is a country bar. It's called the Athletic Club because they sponsor the local softball team. And there's a lot of athletic drinking that goes on. And the school. And in this school, every older student is paired with a younger student to protect them, to watch them, to take care of them. When I was in 6th grade, I had no responsibility like that. And when I was in 1st grade, I hid from the 6th graders. They scared me. In this school, the kids ride the buses with the younger kids. They put on their snowsuits, not something you have to do here. They help them learn to read. They help them learn their math. Kids, this is going to sound a little strange, kids work at the school where I taught for 28 years. They cook, they clean, they shovel snow, they cut grass. And I live in a working class community where people don't yell at us and say, my kid's not going to school to wash dishes. They think, I have a really hard time getting her to wash dishes at home. Thank you. This is great. Kids work in any way they can to make their community better. I open my book, An Ethic of Excellence, with these 6th grade students building a playhouse for the kindergartners. A playhouse they designed themselves and built themselves during and after school and on weekends. And there's a blessing to living in a small town that has no government. We actually really have no government. We're so small. Everyone in the town comes into the one building in town, the school gym, once a year to argue and make our rules for the town. It's an open town meeting. So, in a town that has no government, we were able to have kids do all the things that usually a government does. They did census reports, they did demographic studies, they did road reports, they did ecological studies, and I'm talking about elementary kids. So when the state said, we need an amphibian census done for the town, we need to know what amphibians live in our town, other towns and cities hired a herpetologist or a naturalist to go study amphibians. We used 38 third and fourth graders. And those kids, during school, after school, and on weekends, spent their days in the woods and in the rivers and in the swamps collecting amphibians. And they became scientific experts in amphibian identification, not just adult amphibians, but larval amphibians. They collected amphibians all day long, all night long. They weighed them, they measured them, they photographed them. And when they sent their report to the state for the state amphibian database, they got a letter back from the state that said, thank you, third and fourth grade herpetologists. Your town submitted more data than any town in the state of Massachusetts. Now, it wasn't a fair fight, right? Everyone else had one scientist going out and sampling. We had 38 kids obsessed with identifying amphibians. But the state also said, thank you for your data. We do have to point out that you made a couple species identification mistakes. 2 of the species that you listed don't actually live in your town. So the kids were incensed. They had to learn how to write a very polite response. So they wrote back, thank you so much for your acknowledgement of our work, but we respectfully disagree with your critique of our analysis. We believe we have correctly identified those 2 species, and here are more data for you. Photographs, measurements. They got a letter back from the state, we're sending our state herpetologist to meet with you. He drove all the way from Boston out to a town where he had never heard of, met with the third and fourth graders, they brought him through the woods to the bog and showed him the species, and you know who was right. After the kids realized they knew more than the state herpetologist, they said, Mr. Berger, we're not just learning to be scientists, we kind of are scientists already. And those kids went on to create an amphibian field guide to our town, since we didn't have a field guide to our town. I brought that field guide to King Middle School, the middle school you just saw on video, and they created a field guide to Casco Bay in Portland, Maine, a field guide that was sold in the tourist shops, and a field guide that is raising money for the National Park Service there in Portland, Maine. Every student worked on that field guide, whether they were born in Somalia or whether they were born in the US. Every kid worked on that field guide and had his or her own page. Imagine being a 7th grader, bringing your parent or your foster parent into a store or into the National Park office and say, this is our book. This is my class's book that we created. It's raising money to save the bay. This is my page. I researched this page. I drew this. I never did anything in my 13 years of public school education that I still have that I'm proud of. Nothing I could show you. These students already had things that they're going to treasure for their life and that will be sold in the stores in their town because they're making a contribution and because it's high quality. And they were not allowed to draw a jellyfish by going online and looking at a picture of a jellyfish and copy it. These kids had to go down to the ocean, and we borrowed wetsuits and underwater cameras, and they actually went into the water and photographed these things, and then drew from their photographs. Because real scientists aren't drawing from the internet. Real scientists are getting themselves dirty and freezing cold and exploring things and living the life of an exciting scientist. I brought that field guide to the lowest performing middle school in the state of Massachusetts. They took on the swamp behind their school, called the Dump, cleaned it up, built interpretive signs and walkways, and created a field guide to that bog. This was the beginning of a reaffirmation that these kids are not poor kids in their spirit and heart. And along with our literacy work, they went on to get above district average within 3 years. I brought it to a pre-K in Washington, D.C., and kids that were just getting their literacy together created a field guide to the park down the street from their house. I brought it to a 3rd grade in Rochester, where students created a field guide to a local park that could be sold to raise money for the park. And I brought it at the inception of High Tech High in San Diego, California, where students created an adult-level field guide to San Diego Bay, which sells for $25, has a foreword by Jane Goodall, and has raised tens of thousands of dollars for the school through its sales. I don't want to say this is all about natural history either. We have cultural field guides students have created, telling the stories of local heroes who have lived through the Depression, celebrating the lives of local veterans who served in World War II in published books, honoring them at assemblies like the one you saw on video. All of this work is in an open source resource, the Center for Student Work, which I curate with my colleagues at Harvard and at Expeditionary Learning. All of it free for downloading if you ever want project models that can be useful. I want to stop now, though, and say the projects I'm describing are often really big and grand. But much of the work we do with students is not giant projects. That doesn't mean we can't obsess about quality in that same way. I have a video I'd like to share with you that's a story of one piece of work by one student being shepherded to quality. That story is called Austin's Butterfly, and it's a story of one first grader's drawing. So we'll roll that video. Thank you. What would you guys say to teachers if they're not getting high quality work? Could they learn something from this? And what would you say to them that they could do differently in their classrooms? This is a story called Austin's Butterfly. And it's a true story about a first grade boy, and his name is Austin, and he goes to school, or used to go to school, in a town called Boise, Idaho. And in his class in Boise, Idaho, they were studying butterflies, and he had to do a project. His job in first grade was to draw a butterfly, and this is the butterfly that he picked. Austin had to use this photograph as his model, and he had to draw an accurate scientific drawing of this butterfly. This is called a tiger swallowtail.
I knew it!
Can you tell, Toby, why it's called tiger?
Because it kind of has the stripes of the tiger right there.
Good. So here was Austin's job. He was supposed to do a scientific drawing of that butterfly. But remember, Austin was only in first grade. And you know what he did? He forgot to look like a scientist carefully. He got his paper and he just started to draw the image of a butterfly that he had in his head. And he wasn't looking like a scientist, and so this is what he drew.
Whoa.
It's not bad, and it is a butterfly, but does it look exactly like this?
No.
No, it doesn't yet. It doesn't look exactly like this yet. And so they didn't look at this and say, good, Austin, you're done. They said, Austin, good start. Now we can start giving you critique so you can do a second draft and make it better, and a third draft and make it better, and you can make it much, much closer to this, and he was ready to go. All of the first graders in his critique group sat on the floor like you guys are, and they decided to split their advice into two kinds. First, just the shape of the wings. And then when the shape was right, they'd give him advice about the pattern inside the wings. Alia, what would you say?
You can make it much pointier.
Good. These wings could be much pointier. Who else would add something? Atak, what would you say?
How about the angle? Because, not to be mean about
Yes.
the angle, it's just not exact, so...
Okay, so show me. Come on up here, Atak. Show me what you would ask him to do slightly differently.
Like to make it a little longer.
Longer where? Draw where you would do it.
Right there.
Okay, so pull this out longer.
Yeah.
That's very specific, Atak. Thank you. Jamila, what would you say?
It's like triangle.
Good. Jamila, I love that. So you're saying more like a triangle shape. And I agree. Well, you know what? Those first graders came up with most of those same ideas. And you know what Austin said? He said, okay, I'll go try. And he went back to his seat and he drew this. Does this look more like a triangle? Yeah. Did he go out further, like Atak was suggesting?
Yes. Yeah.
Did he add some jaggedness here?
Yes.
Like Cindy? Did he get rid of that bottom thing?
Yes.
So he did listen to his friends, and he made it better. It's not perfect. Toby, what would you say?
I'd say don't put those little tail things so pointed in. I'd say put them more pointed down.
Good. Okay, and Ethan, what would you say?
I think you should make the wings like this, not like this.
Okay, he listened to his friends, and they said, this is really a lot better, Austin. That second draft really is better.
Yeah, maybe you can make a third one.
Good, maybe he could make a third draft. And so he did this draft.
That's his third draft.
That's his third draft, Hadley. That's just right. Elijah, what do you notice there?
Well, one wing's more pointed than the other, and that side is a little bit higher than the others.
Good. Coburn?
Right here, it doesn't have the inside thing still.
Ah, okay. Needs a little bit more of that notch. So, do you think maybe he should do a fourth draft?
Yeah.
Well, that's just what he said. He said, shoot, okay, I got round again. I'll go back and do a fourth draft.
Listen.
He listened. Does it look more even like Elijah was suggesting?
Yes.
Yeah, and does it look like it's coming out a little sharper, like Cindy was suggesting? And like Atak was saying, it's a little, the angle looks a little better. So now Austin was feeling really good. He said, am I ready to add some pattern? And they said, okay, why don't you try adding some of the pattern? And he did.
He's good at it. He is so good.
And then they said, Austin, you're ready for color.
Really?
Let's look at his last draft. And what do you think? Did it come out really good?
Yeah.
Yeah.
It actually looks way.
What do you think about how much progress he made? And Tak, what would you say about his progress?
He made like a lot of progress. He persevered doing it. His friends were honest with him.
What was it about the kinds of advice that they gave that allowed him to get better each time? Hassan?
Well, they told him what was wrong about it.
Did they say it's just wrong, or were they more specific than that?
They were more specific, but they weren't mean about it.
Great. Hadley.
He made 6 drafts.
And so is that something that other kids should learn from? What should we learn from that?
We can make other drafts if it's not right.
Good. So if it's not right, you can keep doing more drafts to make it better.
You just don't use things in your head. You want to use a sharp eye.
Good. He used the eyes of a scientist. Great. So I hope what's clear there is that even with the grand contributions I've shown before of kids trying to save their communities, make them safer places, save money for the city, that even the small contribution of making a beautiful card that's going to be sold in the community, just that small thing being done well matters. That Austin was able to make a contribution of something of beauty and accuracy because he took the time to do more drafts, as Hadley said in that piece. I want to tell the story of one particular piece of work that went through multiple drafts. It's a strange project from my class. It's a cross-sectional underground cave home for people to live in, with places for people in prehistoric times. The reason I'm sharing that project is because it's the story of this girl, Jamie. It's her real name. Jamie lived directly behind the school. The school was that I taught in for 25 years was behind those bushes. Jamie is here with her horse, Foxy. She bought this horse with her own money because she lived in a very poor home, but she worked as a babysitter. And she was the most sought-after babysitter in my town because she was honest and kind and organized and tender and creative with young children. But she also happened to be learning disabled. She had learning challenges in every subject, and in many schools she would have been outside the classroom for most of the time. She worked on projects in the mainstream in this school where I taught for all of her time, getting extra support the entire time. This is Jamie as a first grader on the left when she published her very first project, a book. Jamie came to me as a fifth grader and she said, "Mr. Berger, I know the kind of projects you do. I can't do projects like that. My brain doesn't work right." And I teased her and said, "You'll be fine." She said, "No, my brain really doesn't work right," and she started to cry. Well, the second day of school, we went cave exploring, and she was brave, tough, and excited. But on the third day of school, she had to do a first draft of her cave drawing, and she didn't understand the concept. She didn't understand figure ground. She didn't understand cross-section. And so her first draft didn't have the features it needed. She was ashamed by it, and she started to cry, and she said, "I refuse to pin it up for critique, and you can't make me." And I said, "Jamie, you have to get critique, but you don't have to do it in public." So she chose her friend Nicole. Nicole gave her critique, re-explained cross-section more capably than I, apparently, and Jamie was able to do a second draft that was more cross-section. She said, "I don't mind this one, I'll pin this up for critique," and so she did. And one of the pieces of critique she got from the cutest boy in the class was that those overlapping rocks looked good. So her third draft was all overlapping rocks. Kids then critiqued her to say that they lost some of the space in her second draft. So she combined the overlapping rocks of her third draft with the space in her second draft and came up with another draft that now had both. And then she said, "Mr. Berger, I'm starting to get proud of this piece. I think it's going to work. But my handwriting isn't very good, and I know you teach calligraphy. You taught my brother calligraphy. Could you teach it to me really fast?" And I said, "Jamie, I don't know if I can, but you can use our light table." So we had a glass table that I built in our classroom where kids could trace. When I was a kid, tracing was called cheating. And then when I started doing architecture, I realized tracing is a tool you use to learn and to transfer. So I let my kids trace all the time when they were learning to get a sharp hand on drafting. So Jamie came in before school every day, knocked on the window, 7 a.m. I'd open the door, she'd come in, and she would trace. After a week of tracing, this was her freehand calligraphy. Now, if you're a calligrapher, you notice that it's inconsistent. But if you're not, you think, this isn't bad. And so when you look at her final draft in close-up, you see even the lettering is well done. This is a small piece of work. It doesn't matter to the whole world, but when it was shown at an exhibition and her grandmother came to see it, her grandmother cried that Jamie could do something so beautiful. Because I live in a small town, I know what happened to almost every single student I ever taught. So Jamie is somebody I still see. Jamie went on to middle school, still had a substantial ed plan, and went on to high school, still with a substantial ed plan. Unlike anyone in her family except her older brother, whom I taught, she graduated from high school. And she got into college at the Stockbridge School of Agriculture, the University of Massachusetts, majoring in horse management. I went to Jamie's college graduation party. Never been more proud of a student. She walked up to me at the graduation party with 2 big plastic cups of beer, handed one to me. She said, "Mr. Berger, can you believe I'm a college graduate?" She said, "I have the same learning disabilities as I had in first grade. I still reverse letters. I still reverse numbers. My brain still has glitches." I said, "How do you do it then?" She said, "Strategies, hard work, just like I did in elementary school. I don't think these things are ever going away, but it's not going to stop me from succeeding." She now manages a horse farm, has a champion 15-year-old daughter, Ryder. Couldn't be more proud of her. Before I end with a project, I want to tell you one quick story from my life. Everything I'm showing you requires going deep. And the pressure on us as teachers is always to go fast, to cover and cover and cover. I'm not suggesting that we don't need to cover a lot of material. Whether you're teaching first grade or whether you're teaching high school, there's a lot we're supposed to cover. But we can't always be in coverage mode. We can't always be in survey mode. We've got to switch off survey mode and get into deep mode sometimes so that kids can create something they are proud of, whether that something is a performance like we saw this morning or a piece of work like I'm showing you today. Here's the personal story. My father worked for the same chemical plant for 47 years. These days, it's hard to imagine anyone would work at the same job for 47 years, but that's the way it was. He knew he would get a pension. He stayed at that chemical plant for 47 years. When he retired, he and my mother were going to travel for the rest of their lives, living on his pension. He retired at age 68. He died at age 69. But during that 1 year of his retirement, he traveled the world with my mother, and they had the greatest year of their life. They called me up. This was in the 80s. They called me up and said, "You have to come to our house and see our pictures of our trip to Europe." And I said, "Sure." And I drove my truck to their house, and I got out, and I went in, and this was before the internet, no computers. Pictures meant their entire dining room table was covered with pictures. They were eating in the kitchen. And I looked at those pictures, and I was a little confused, and I learned that they had bought a package tour of Europe, 14 countries in 12 days. And so every picture was from the train window. It was a blurry cathedral, a blurry church, a blurry castle, a blurry... And they loved them, though. But they argued about every one. This one's in Italy. No, I think it's in Germany. Maybe Switzerland. And I realized if you had given them an assessment about their trip to Europe afterward, they may not have learned a whole lot about any one country. But they had a wonderful time. And I had this epiphany at that moment. That was like my entire public school education, looking out the train window. Dates, formulas, just zooming by me the whole time. And then in the summer, it would evaporate. I did really well in school. I learned it for the test, and then it would just go away because I was always looking out that train window because we had so much to cover. We were always moving so fast. Now, what if they had allowed my parents to get off the train in Italy, just for 3 days maybe? And they had had a beautiful Italian meal late at night and met some people and talked to them about Italy, and they had spent time in the Uffizi Gallery in Florence, and they would have come back and said, "Oh my God, Italy is the most amazing place in the world. The Italians are so different and so wonderful, and the food is so great, and the art is so beautiful." And then we went to Germany, and we spent 2 days in Germany, and they were totally different. They didn't have that experience. And we need to make sure our kids have that experience. We need to stop the train in Italy occasionally with our students and let them go deep in a topic. Let them create something or do something of beauty. Not that we're not going to get on that train again and travel to a whole lot of different content that we have to cover. But if we end the year and they've been on that train all the time, all they're going to have at the end is blurry pictures from the train window. We need them to have some great memories and understandings of a culture, of a place, of a history. I'm going to end with this project. This is one of my favorite projects recently. Students from this school studied snakes. These are second grade students. And they created a children's book about snakes that's now sold to schools anywhere. Before they did that book, they looked at the Austin's butterfly story. And here's an interview with one of the girls in that class. She's telling me about Austin. With this boy named Austin, his class was doing a unit on butterflies, so he had to draw a butterfly. And first his butterfly started out as a plain butterfly, just like this, and then just wings, and that's it. But by the end of his sixth draft, he had work that was like amazing. And I had no idea I could get like good work that was even close to Austin's work. But Mr. Levy has been coming in, and he saw mine, and he's like, "Goodness, your work is just like Austin's butterfly." And I think, Austin's butterfly? And then for the first time, I looked down at my work and I'm like, you know, you're right. And then, like, I just had a good day after that. Here's her first draft of a Cobra. Second draft, third draft, fourth draft, fifth draft, sixth draft, seventh draft, final draft. This is like Austin's Butterfly. She had a reason to be proud to have contributed something great to this book. I will end with a very short video. These students, in the course of studying snakes, in a school that focuses on character, like I believe all schools should always focus on character, she and her classmates decided that snakes are persecuted. In religions, in myths, and in life, everybody hates snakes. They kill snakes, they badmouth snakes, snakes are always the bad guys, and it's not their fault. And so these kids decided we have to stand up for snakes. They thought, how do we do this? Do we create a public service announcement? Do we write an article for the newspaper? Do we do a letter to the editor? And then they decided, we know how to do it. We'll create a music video and post it to YouTube, and it will go viral. So we tried to explain to them that just because you make a music video doesn't mean it will go viral. But luckily, they didn't listen, because they made a music video and it went viral. That's what I'm going to show you. I will tell you that they didn't just make a music video, they used the Austin's Butterfly process. They watched kid-appropriate music videos with their teacher. They analyzed the criteria of what makes a good music video. They found outside experts. They got access to a studio, and they created a high-quality music video, a work of beauty, and that's why it went viral. They took the Lady Gaga song, Born This Way, which is trying to say people that are different, they were just born this way. And they created this video called Snakes Are Born This Way. So we'll roll the last video, and that will be my closing.
It doesn't matter if you're scared of them or not. Just open up your heart, because snakes were just born this way.
Our teachers told us in second grade we'd be herpetologists. If you don't know, that means we study snakes from everywhere around the world. There's nothing wrong with having scaly skin. We say snakes are all made perfectly. So watch them slither swoop, 'cause they'll go far, even with no legs and arms. No need to be scared of snakes, they're not all the same. You can't change who they are. Snakes are born this way, they are a part of this world. Don't judge snakes by their looks, you can't change who they are. Snakes are born this way. Did you know that without snakes, mice would eat up all our grains? There would be no food for cows. Without cows, we have no pizza and no ice cream. We need snakes, baby, they are born this way. You can't change who they are. Snakes are born this way.
That was great.
That was actually a really high pitch note. That was really good.
Thank you. I will be here all day. I wish you a wonderful school year. And if you create things of beauty and quality with your students this year, please think to send them to us. I'd love to share them with the world. Thank you.